Imagine a society in which there are no classes, everyone is equal, and we are all content with our neighbor, and we are filled with goodwill toward each other. That is the premise of which socialism is based off of. It sounds great, a society where we only have good intentions and we only are thinking about each other. However, it has become the exact opposite of that. Socialism is a controversial topic in my home, in my school, and in my work. I decided to conduct my own research using online sources, and I used information to compile my own opinion. These resources are from universities and different institutions that have their own opinion, but presented the facts. Now I want to give all of you the opportunity to do the same. So what is socialism's definition? The first resource I'd like to reference because of its simplicity is the History Channel. History Channel describes socialism as any political or economic theory that says community rather than the individuals handles money, property, and national resources. Now, because y'all grew up in America, this statement sounds fishy. However, the original idea of socialism was harmless. Socialism's roots take place around the philosopher Plato's time. He thought of a collective society. However, a man named Thomas More thought up the wooden frame for the whole concept. He described an island where there was no money and people solely worked for the good of the community. Again, that's not an evil idea. Socialism really started to poke its head out of the ground during the Industrial Revolution. Factory workers were working themselves into the ground, and the owners of factories were getting millions and the workers were barely getting hundreds. Their conditions were harsh and terrible, and way too many of them lost their lives to their job. This made people enraged and started a whole workers' movement. This, remember, Becca, when we were watching The Men Who Built America with Daddy, and the whole factories were having riots and people were throwing fits? That's like the time that this took place in. After thinkers like Thomas More, the guy who thought about the island, these ideas, these utopian ideas, were just thrown out the window. A guy named Karl Marx came and established a science to socialism. From this science, we have socialist staples like Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin is known for killing 6 million people in World War II. The Soviet Union is known for several crimes against humanity. All of these societies that started for good of the people turned into absolute power and a lot of power struggles. This is the issue that socialism has always run into. The community never ends up running things. It always turns out to be one person at the top, distributing goods that is not equal. So now you know how socialism emerged and continued. Let's talk about socialistic principles in the United States. Socialism has never been a welcome topic in the U.S. Many politicians have tried to establish them and very few have stuck. Some that have stuck, however, are welfare and Social Security. Social Security is what workers pull from their paycheck and it is redistributed to beneficiaries. Welfare is government money distributed to people who are needy. This is another example of people taking a good idea and using it for bad. There have been so many stories of people who have gone to terrible lengths to get welfare or just don't go back to work because of welfare checks. Now, I've also heard great stories of people who use welfare to get back up on their feet. There's a good and bad side to both of these issues. However, one story that has stuck with me is the story of Gabriel Fernandez. If you don't know his story, he was abused terribly by his parents, and the only reason that they kept Gabriel in their house was so they would get welfare money. And so that is just one of the examples that I think of when welfare comes up. Yet, Democratic politicians are convinced that socialism would work in the United States if we fully converted to it. One person convinced of that is Bernie Sanders. He most likely is what your brain goes to when you think of socialism in the United States. Bernie is either a respected figure or an absolute joke. Again, Bernie's ideas are not formulated from evil. He believes in a socialist society, not a dictatorship, but most of his opposers are mad because he is carrying over socialistic principles which limit America's drive for a free market. An entry written by a Stanford professor says this about a form of socialism called central planning. It is hard for central authority to gather the relevant information from producers and consumers. Second, even if it could gather enough information, the computation of an optimal plan would require enormously complex calculations which may be beyond capacity for planners. As a result, a planned economy would likely lag behind surrounding capitalistic economies, and their members would tend to lose faith. Most of the theories mentioned by Stanford actually ended like that, totally disproving their theory on their idea of socialism, and that's how socialism has always played out. So now that you have the origins, some of the history, and differing opinions, what side of the concept are you going to err on? Can America conquer the undefeated feat of socialism, or will that compromise the great nation that we are today? Okay, so I made my speech clear by using general sources and explaining them. I made it interesting by including stories from various other historical sources, and I made it memorable by asking a question that makes the audience think about my speech.